Hi, my name is Carlo Volpe,
And I'm Desmond Silva,
and
and
welcome to
welcome to
Centerville
Centerville
Voice.
Voice.
Hey everybody, welcome to Centerville Voice. My name is Carlo and my good friend Desmond. How are you, Des?
Okay, about you, Carlo?
I'm great, thanks, buddy. Folks, welcome back. Episode number 13, I believe, right, Desmond? Episode
I
number
think we're on
13.
14 now.
14, okay, 14. And tonight we're going to talk about Cuba. It's been basically in the news recently, but it's been something that I've wanted to talk about. I'm sure you wanted to talk about as well for a while. And I think it fits in perfectly with what we were talking about and what we kind of allude to as what can go wrong. So let's get right into it. At the simplest standpoint, or the simplest kind of point of view, Cuba has a communist dictatorship, or is it communist? How do they call it?
Yeah, they have a communist government. It's so of course the communist government essentially they would have someone who act like a dictator. I mean, if there are any elections, they're false because it's always by appointed. They're always rigged. You'd never have if there any type of elections that happen in a communist government. There you have the party in power who has more favor to win because of the fact that they can alter votes, they can change things. It's never a fair election.
Okay, you can't really trust it, I guess.
Can't really trust it.
And what's going on right now in Cuba is that there's riots, right? There's protests, there's people walking on the streets, and I mean, for lack of a better term, they're fed up with what's going on, right, with the government.
Yeah, what's happening is the same thing that if you look at the former USSR, if you look at China prior to its evolution to a quasi type of capitalist, communist, or more controlled capitalist, or government-controlled capitalist economic system, they're suffering the exact same problems right now. Is that it's food. First of all, before COVID, this was not just a COVID issue. This just added on to the whole COVID thing, just added on to it.
Yeah.
But long before that, you had issues with rationing food. Because you got to remember in these communist regimes, these communist governments, where you have a purely communist economy, everything is run by the government.
Yeah.
Even including the economy. So the government, everything is state-run. And so the government is responsible for feeding the people, not individual private organizations or private entities like you do here in Canada. You have the farmers who are independent; they run privately. They may be subsidized by the government in order to help.
But I think what you're getting at is that the market takes care of it, right?
Yes. So the market kind of dictates the value of food and all that stuff, and also
it's the market that brings the food to our house, right?
Exactly.
I go to the store, the market, the grocery store is part of the network, part of that market. Yeah.
And because the farmers are free to grow what they want to grow, and because they're the experts with how to grow food, and how the fisheries, the fishermen and the people who are involved in the fisheries, they know how to catch fish and also taking care of the meats and all that stuff. These are experts in this particular field, and they know best how to take care of this type of stuff, which is why we don't have a famine here in Canada, right? Canada has gone through some really bad times in the past where farmers were struggling to make sure that they could grow wheat and stuff like that, and that has happened in the past. But most people never really felt it because of the fact that we were able to, because they handled it in such a way that they were able to overcome it. With the communist regimes, that doesn't happen. If you look at the Chinese government, they were having back in the 70s, before they switched to a capitalist system, they were suffering famine. There was food shortages, and there were a lot of rationing going on. Cuba, so the USSR they also had long lines with food stamps where the government would hand you off like a loaf of bread or how much food you need for your family only, your household, and then you just get that. You can't get any more, and that's it. No more, no less.
I talked to somebody the other day who experienced that back in Europe, in Romania, and they were saying to me that you'd go to get your ticket for bread, but not only that, you'd go there and there would be no eggs or there would be no bread, right? Because like you said, not only was it controlled and everybody only got their share, but your share wasn't even there when you got there. And that's because, like you said, the market, not only does the free market kind of take care of things like price a lot of times, but it takes care of supply, right? Because like you said, they're experts. And I think the reason why the communists always ends up people in famines or starving is because it's an artificially propped up system, right? It's only going to be propped up by probably just making more money, right? Printing more money, then your value of your dollar goes down, and then it crashes.
Exactly. It doesn't have any value because the government's just giving you money, which you then just give it back to the government, right?
Not only that, this government company, not only that, all these companies that the government's running, who are they selling the product to? If it's a communist, they're really not selling it to anybody, are they?
Really, they're just giving it out to people. That's it.
Or maybe they're selling it at
money's worthless.
It's not the best way to do it.
No, I mean, money has value when someone does work to earn that money. Okay, it's not necessarily the food itself that you're paying to get, because I can go to any tree and pluck an apple off a tree and eat the apple. I'm fine. I don't have to pay for that, right? If I go out in the forest and I find myself an apple tree and no one owns that apple tree, I can just go right up to it, pluck it and eat. No one's going to do anything about it. Mother Nature is not going to go around saying, hey, you got to pay for that. No, I did the work. I climbed a tree. I plucked the apple and I ate it. Right. Exactly. What's happening in the system we have right now, in the free market system, there's someone who's living is to go up the tree, pluck the apples, gather them, and then sell them off.
And the cost of the apple is worked into their cost. Exactly.
So the cost of the apple is due to the labor involved, right? So and also how plentiful that particular resource is. If apples are scarce, the price goes up because it's hard to gather them. If the apples are plentiful, the price goes down.
Exactly. And then there's the demand aspect as well. These are all elements of a real working living market.
Exactly.
And when you have a communist system like that, it's completely controlled from the top and like a puppet, but it just hasn't worked yet.
It doesn't work. And Cuba is just another example of that. There is one American-Cuban reporter who recalls the stories of his parents and all his older siblings who, before they moved to the USA, he was just a small boy. He was like 4 years old when he moved, but his father and mother and his older siblings told him the whole story about what was going on there. And one of the biggest problems was food shortages. They had the lineups for food, and you would get, the thing is, things like toilet paper were commodities. Yeah. Right. If you gave if you had a maid and you gave the maid, with his words, if you gave the maid a roll of toilet paper, you might as well have given her a gold bar. That's how much it was worth. That's how rare this stuff was. It was very difficult to get even toilet paper or basic stuff like that, basic necessities. Yeah. So it's not necessarily just COVID that's caused the problem. And here's the thing: is a lot of people on the Democrat side, they're now like AOC or Ms. Cortez is blaming, and even BLM for the higher ups in BLM on BLM Incorporated. They're blaming the U.S. embargo that's been in there since 1962. But the thing is, here's the thing: if you want to test a country's economy as whether the economy will actually be able to stand on its own 2 feet, put an embargo on them. Put trade sanctions on us so you don't do any trade with them whatsoever. Try doing that to India. They will have no problem surviving, right? Because India, back in the 90s, what they did, India was screwed royally by the British, right? Back in the early, back in the 80s and 90s, there was still, there was an economy that was going, but there was a lot of disparity. Right, and there still is there is still disparity there, but the thing is, it's not as bad as it used to be. With the country as it's on its own, if what it did was I think somewhere around the late 90s or 2000s, something like that, it closed its borders to the rest of the world. It closed all trade, and it built everything from the ground up, made itself completely self-sufficient. From agriculture to industry, they had everything. So if you took India and you put this is their capitalist system, democratic system. If you took India and then you put embargoes on them, they'd be like, okay, We don't care. We have our own car industry.
Well, they don't need us.
We have our own
they're
fuel
much
industry.
bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're making biofuels, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have to worry about fossil fuels as much, right? Even then, right? They can trade with if they wanted to trade with their neighbors down south in Sri Lanka, they can get oil from them, right?
Well, when I think what the Democrats are doing, and the radical Democrats, because like I said, always mostly Democrats are normal.
Yeah.
Most of the Republicans are normal. But the crazy left is what they're saying is they're kind of conflating this, right? And they're using this confusion with, oh, it's COVID. People are tired. People are saying, whatever. And, but in reality, this has been boiling for some time.
It has been boiling for
years
some
and
time.
years.
If it was COVID,
yeah,
if it was COVID, you'd be having the same type of complaints and reactions that we have here in Canada.
Yeah. Now
People would not be complaining that much.
Right? You mentioned something earlier before we started recording about Castro. So Fidel Castro died a few years ago now, right?
Yeah, 2011 he died, right?
Yeah.
So he founded the Communist Party of Cuba on October 3rd, 1965, and he basically was at the reins of that till the day he died, right? Okay. The guy was real silver-tongued, as I said, just like the guy up on Parliament Hill, and a lot of people
so we should talk about him after too.
Yeah, talk about that because. But the thing is,
but do you think that it kept I'm not saying that it was better with Fidel, but did he keep this at bay, or was he just ruthless and got rid of this?
Well, the thing is, he was very silver-tongued. At the same time, if anyone who opposed him, he would be captured and likely be put in front of a firing squad.
Okay.
Right? It's no different from what's happening in China right now. A lot of people who are dissidents, a lot of Chinese people who are dissidents against the CCP are they're captured and never ever seen again. And they have shown images of people being shot in front of firing squads, and these are people who are political dissidents, as they would call them, the revolutionaries for this against the Communist Party, or those who would speak up against activists, for that matter. Raul is basically trying to blame the U.S., point fingers at the U.S. embargo that's been there for ages, right?
Okay.
It's been there for decades. It's been there for a while, almost 50, it's getting close to 50 years now. It's getting up there, about 40, about 40-some years. And it's just a blame game for that, because that shouldn't have any effect on you, because if the country, if the communist economy was working in Cuba, it doesn't matter what embargo would be there. It doesn't matter. Plus, anyways, the U.S. is only one country.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that the Cubans couldn't trade with China, one of their fellow Cuban communist countries?
Well, and they do, quite honestly, right? And they've tried to trade with Russia for years. Well, I mean, the whole Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Them and USSR were buddies, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Russians had nuclear missiles in Cuba pointed at the U.S.
Yeah.
Right. While the U.S. had their missiles in Alaska pointed at Russia.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's distinguish, if we can, the difference between the Cuban style of government and economy with the Chinese style of government and economy, because the difference that I know is that they sort of have like a quasi free market. Is that true? Or quasi-capitalism?
That is pretty much the truth. That is true. Now, the thing is that it's government-backed, government-controlled, but not totally.
Okay.
What happens is that instead of the government having its officials running everything, it leaves the people to decide what to buy, what to sell, and they have a free market that's running in a way.
So heavily regulated, maybe?
It's controlled in the sense that there is actually very little regulation, as a matter of fact.
I wonder why they're booming.
What the government does is they boost any type of business that brings in money for the country, right?
There you go.
Which makes sense. That's smart. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they put control over that business as being owned by the government. And no one can actually do business in China without having the government control it in some way.
Wow. Oh, so it's so implicated.
Unless, of course, you're in Hong Kong. Like, Hong Kong's a whole different story. But mainland China, right?
Yeah.
So that's what, and that's one reason why the Hong Kong Chinese are so much against the mainland Chinese, the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party from taking over, because every single business loses its autonomy.
Yeah.
When it comes to running its business, right?
Now in Cuba, they don't have that market, right?
No, theirs is more reminiscent of the former USSR.
Okay.
Right. In a way. So, but the thing is, it's very, very similar in that the economic style is almost the same. It's very, very comparable, right?
There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of
yes. So the thing, that's the thing, and the fact is that now the people are just fed up because now there's a new generation of young folks because the old generation lived in fear of Castro under his. Now you have a new generation that never knew Castro.
Exactly. There's separation now. Yeah.
And so now that generation is saying, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, they suffer through all this. And now we gotta live through this too. No more. We want.
And that makes me think that this is the perfect timing for us here in Canada and US to see what's going on, because our left, right, is, in my opinion, your opinion, I'm sure, become radicalized, and they've tried to paint the picture to the rest of the population that the Communist Party or the communist way is good, even if they don't call it communist, but they think it is. But now this is the perfect example because, like you said, the young people now in Canada and the US are thinking that the communist is good, communism is good, and this is the perfect time because, no, the young people, I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're seeing in Cuba when young people are really starting a revolution. I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Right. And what we're seeing in the US is just young people whining.
And what's happening in the US is the same thing that would happen to Cuba decades ago. Back in the 60s, Fidel Castro would actually go into the colleges and universities and basically rile up the young folks in order to have them believe in his movement. Because the thing is about college students and university students is that you just become an adult, but you're still impressionable.
Super impressionable.
Very impressionable. So as opposed to, that's why they don't target the older folks. The older folks are more set in their ways. They're not as impressionable. And the thing is, because of experience and because of what they've experienced in the past, they know they're a lot more discerning, right? I could give a good example. My grandfather, God bless his soul, he could just look at a person and know what he's thinking, right? He could look at any person, especially a young person. He could look at the young person and basically know what they're thinking, right?
Yeah.
So that's the level of discernment that they have. But you tell that to a young person, and I can just take for instance, my son is also on the extreme end of his great grandfather, right?
Yeah.
He has no idea. Yeah. Of course, he's a small child,
and that's why I think that the young people of here in America and Canada really need to take notice of what's going on in Cuba. They really do need to take notice, because these hypothetical scenarios that they think maybe worked out in a textbook, or, you know what, I'll be honest, when I was younger, I thought as well, hey, on paper, communism does work on paper. So I actually thought that when I was younger. I was hopeful that someplace we could figure it out. I really was hopeful. Now I'm starting to see through many, many examples over the last, 22 decades or whatever, but that there has been many examples where it's not working. And young people, unfortunately, this is just another example of something you learn as you get older.
Yeah, the politicians are the ones trying to rile you up, right?
I was just saying the politicians. Yeah, and they're riding on the backs of these young people.
Yes.
Yeah.
They try to ride on the backs of these young folks, and they're the ones who are basically trying to ruin things. And it happens very, very slowly, very, very subtly, right? It's in a way that the young folks don't notice, but the older folks, they're looking at this like, okay, yeah, that's problematic. Yeah. Right. So
I think it's lessons to learn from Cuba. What's going on?
Lessons to learn, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Well, what do you think? What else can we talk about?
I don't know, man. I think that also the one thing that we need to do, first of all, stop getting. I think that people should be supporting the Cuban people who are protesting. There are still pockets of people who are. There are not some pockets, but there are still people in support of the communist revolution, support of the communist government. I know, like I said before, I know one lady who I met in Sri Lanka who was Chinese. I met her at the airport, and she was on her way back to mainland China. She was a very successful business lady,
Okay.
and she loved the communist system, right?
You're doing well.
It's doing well, but the thing is, it's not pure communist.
No.
Then I have another friend of mine who was Russian, and he lived in as a young man in Russia during the U.S. when the USSR was there, right? When it was a communist country, and
Yeah.
he said no, it was horrible. It was a joke at the end. That's why Gorbachev finally was like, okay, yeah, this is not working, and basically gave up on it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good reminder to everybody. Like say, look around. There's many examples, and many examples in history as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's all it is.
Thanks so much, Des.
Yep. We'll just see you guys in the next video then.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Peace. Take care.
Hi, and thanks for watching this episode of Centerville Voice. If you like what you see, don't forget to share, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on YouTube, also click on the notifications icon to make sure you'll get notified on all of our new episodes every Friday. By sharing and liking this episode and all of our episodes, it really helps to promote the channel. And by sharing these episodes, it helps to promote our word and get the word out. If you like what you see and hear, please consider becoming one of our supporters on Patreon. 10% of all Patreon supporter donations we receive go directly to our charity of the year. This year, our charity of the year is the Terry Fox Foundation. You can visit us at centervillevoice.com to learn more and engage with us on one of our social media platforms. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Peace.